Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Kelly Jessup and I am the Assistant Director for Digital Learning at Yale School of Management Executive Education. We hope you're doing well and we appreciate you taking the time to join us for this introduction to Yale's CIMA prep course, Investment Management Theory and Practice. This is our 7th year offering this program, and in that time, we've worked with over 3,000 candidates. In our webinar today, we encourage you to listen and engage. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. This is your time. Our program director, Jim Dobbs, is very knowledgeable, and this is a really good opportunity to ask any questions you have and really pick his brain. So to ask questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can submit your question to everyone or just to me, but I suggest you send it to everyone as there may be similar questions in mind. And if you do have any technical issues, you can go ahead and reach out to me via chat. So now I'd like to introduce our program director. Jim Dobbs is CIMA certified. He's also CFP and CPWA certified. He was a financial advisor for 25 years and ran his own RIA practice before retiring to work full-time in his financial education company. Jim has worked with different certifying bodies and universities for the last 20 years, helping build and manage financial certification programs. More importantly, though, Jim has had extensive experience with the Investments and Wealth Institute. He personally helped create the CPWA certification and has served IWI in many roles, including as chair of IWI's Technical Advisory Board. You will see he's passionate about what he does. Jim is committed to success, and he measures his success based on yours. Please welcome Jim Dobbs.
Well, thank you very much. Can you see and hear me okay, Kelly?
Sure can.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. So good to be here with you. Love to take you through a little bit about the CIMA certification for those of you who aren't quite sure if this is the right certification for you or not, but we'll spend most of the time on, if you've made that decision, like how do you get through the Yale program? There's an education component that's required by IWI and their CIMA requirements, and then the test prep, which if you choose Yale, you'll actually spend most of your time in our test prep section getting ready for your certification exam. But we'll tackle all of that together over the next hour or so. And like Kelly said, any questions, fair game. This is just our time. Let me see how big the group is. We've got a medium-sized group today, so not a problem on answering all of your questions. I'll try to save at least a few minutes towards the end for kind of a wrap-up Q&A. That being said, if something pops in your head, just go ahead and get it into the question section there, and Kelly will stop me, or I'll stop a few times along the way as well to make sure we answer those questions. So just for point of clarification, Yale, here at Yale School of Management Executive Education, we provide education for you in this registered education program for CIMA candidates. We also offer test prep, and we've combined those two elements into one program. So it's just really easy. You don't need to go buy other test prep. You don't need to do anything else. You just stick to the plan, go through the Yale process. You should be fine. We'll talk about that. That being said, IWI, Investments and Wealth Institute, they are your certifying body. We're completely separate. We offer education test prep for their CIMA and CPWA certifications. But in terms of applying for candidacy, applying to a program, getting your certification, taking their exam, their what they call certification exam, continuing education and paying fees like I do to keep my certification, that's all done through them. If you're not really familiar with them, go ahead and go to their website. I've got the URL up there. They're easy enough to find. And just get more comfortable with them. CIMA and CPWA are their two big certifications, but they've got a lot of other great resources as well. And I like this little info chart or whatever, infogram that they put out on their website. Just kind of gives you an idea who they are with 17,000 members and what is it, around 11,000, 12,000 certificates between CIMA and CPWA, et cetera. All right, so if you don't know if you're in the right place or not, let me just give you a quick idea about what CIMA is and what it's not, and then I'll compare it to a couple of other certifications really quickly before we get into the Yale specifics. So Certified Investment Management Analyst, CIMA, has been around for about 35 years. was actually created as an alternative to CFA decades ago. Some professors at Wharton, as it turns out, and then some industry practitioners were saying, hey, look, CIMA looks very interesting, especially for those people that want to become securities analysts and portfolio managers. But what about everybody else? I mean, do all the financial planners, financial advisors, investment consultants, most of whom are client facing and not picking individual securities for a portfolio, do they really need to go that far, that deep in terms of the CFA curriculum and test? Do they need to be that quantitative? And their answer, of course, was no. And so they created the curriculum that eventually led to CIMA. So that's it in a nutshell. If you're one of those of us, myself included, who once upon a time was client facing, gave investment advice, investment recommendations. Eventually, I did build and manage portfolios on a discretionary basis in my own RIA. If you're a salesperson or wholesaler, any of those individuals are really what CIMA curriculum was designed to really show the public these people are competent and they've mastered certain skills and knowledge, and you can feel comfortable in their technical competence. Now, you can see up in the right-hand side there, the average earnings, AUM, et cetera. Pretty impressive compared to the industry as a whole. I brought that one up because I think you want to, if you haven't seen it on the website, IWI's website, and if you haven't convinced your manager or boss to let you do this, or you haven't gotten their approval for reimbursement yet, you might go over there. There's some third-party material from Cerulli and Associates, IT Group, seems like there's one more, that does third-party industry research. Who are CIMA designees? Who are CFP designees, et cetera? How much do they make? Where do they work? What services do they offer? And I think some of those things could help you and build a case to get your management to either let you do this and use the credential and or reimburse you at least partially for what it's going to cost you to move through this program and towards certification. We'll talk about the cost in a little bit. All right, talk about real fast about the certification process, because I want to spend most of the time talking about the more complex issues of this whole thing. This is an accredited certification. There are only about 4 that I know of in North America, maybe 5, that are financial certifications accredited at the highest level. ANSI and NOCA, or the national accreditors of the accreditation bodies, if you will. And CIMA is one of those. That's one of the reasons we offer this, because IWI plays at the highest level, if you will, in that regard. That being said, you'll submit an application for candidacy. They do have to run a background check on you, make sure you pass that, match up your background check, your U4, for example, if you're in the securities industry and have a license like most of us did or do. And then they'll look through your application, make sure that that matches up as well. That process takes a few days to a week, typically, on IWI's side. We'll talk about scholarships in a minute, so put that feather in your hat for just a second. Once you get approved, they'll tell us, hey, Jim has been approved as a CIMA candidate. He chose Yale on his application. That's where you're going to choose your education program on their application. And then they get your name, or in this case, my name, to Yale. And then Yale takes about a few days to a week as well. So the whole thing could take a week and a half, 2 weeks between the 2 organizations to approve you and get you set up in our program at Yale with your logon instructions. Now, once you get in the program, we'll talk a lot more about that in a few minutes. Once you get through our program and get ready for the certification exam, you'll take your certification exam. We'll talk about the exam in a little bit. And then you'll get licensing paperwork after you've passed. You sign your paperwork, send it in. They run one more background check to make sure that you're still clean, you're still okay. And then they tell you you've been certified. So kind of sounds like a lot, but it's a pretty simple 4-step process in that regard. All right, I mentioned scholarships. So look on the left-hand side there and just take a quick look at that. If you think any of these might apply to you, including you don't work for a large firm, it's a small independent regional firm, you may get a scholarship. And scholarships range from $1,000 to $5,000. That's a lot. So in my mind, when the price point is like $59.95, So yeah, if you think even for a minute you might qualify, I would spend the 10 minutes it takes. It's a pretty short application they have for the scholarship. Your application for candidacy, which you should do after applying for a scholarship, that one takes a little bit longer. But yeah, spend 10 or 15 minutes on the scholarship application. You got nothing to lose and $1,000 to $5,000 to gain if you're accepted. Those, oh, by the way, those are the only scholarships or discounts that I'm aware of at this point for the CIMA program. We don't have anything going on over at Yale in that regard. All right, let's talk about the curriculum a little bit. I don't want to bore you here, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but it is really, really important. When you're looking at a certification process that takes 100 to 200 hours on average, for some of you it could take more, and there's a chance you won't make it too, right? I mean, these are not lay up exams. I mean, people fail them. We'll talk about pass rates as well. You need to make sure that the certifying body is legit, and I would argue at the highest order. There are only 3 or 4 in North America, in my opinion, that are. IWI is one of those. And then you need to make sure that the program fits you and what you do in your job, your practice. Is it going to help you bring in new clients? Is it going to help you serve your clients better? And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is look at the core content. They have a core topics list, and I'll give you a link to that in just a minute and give you a way to get a hold of that. But here it is, kind of high level. There are 5 domains, they call them, and they got a bunch of sections under each of those domains. We start with fundamentals. And just so you'll know, that core topics list that I'm going to show you in a minute, you can get on our website, you can get on their website, or you can just email me and I'll give you that email in a minute. In our education program, and especially really tightly so in the test prep, we just stick to their core topics list. Oh, I'd love to change up our test prep and kind of move these topics around a little bit, but I'm not going to do that. I think for simplicity's sake, let's just keep this simple. There's plenty of moving parts. We don't need to make this any more complicated than it needs to be. So we'll just do a refresher on statistics, time value of money, your calculator, economics, a little global market history with Roger Ibbotson. We'll do that to lead off the program. Then investments, domain 2. That's kind of like your series 7 and a few other series exam refreshers. So we're going to go back through equities and fixed income. We're going to do real assets and other alternative assets, including hedge funds, those kind of things. So that's kind of cementing your foundation, but hopefully some or even much of that will be review. Then we're going to get into exciting stuff, portfolio and behavioral finance. I'm so glad a few years ago they combined these 2 in one domain. If you're like me and you've been around for even just a few years, you realize, look, you can know all about portfolio theory and methodologies and portfolio construction, yada, yada, yada. But if you can't control yourself and your emotions as a professional, and you can't help your clients, if I can't help my clients control their emotions, especially at highs and lows, then we're going to have a short career and we're not going to have a very successful practice, and our clients are going to come and go, through the revolving door. So behavioral finance is critically important, even though we need to be technically sound. The financial psychology element of this, if you will, is very, very important. Then we'll get back into the math with risk and return measurement and analysis. So a whole lot of math there. I'll show you the formula sheet just a minute. And then we wrap it up in domain 5. They call it portfolio construction and the consulting process. There's not a lot of new content in that domain, in my opinion. There's a little bit, but mostly it's bringing all of it together in more of an applied way, like think client fact patterns. Your client comes to you in this situation. Here are your tools. Here are your constraints by agreement or IPS, investment policy statement. What are your options? And in some cases, what's optimal? What's the best course of action to take? So domain 5 is more applied and kind of brings it all together. Now, here is that lovely PDF, color-coded PDF that I just alluded to. It's got all those 5 domains, but it's got all of the topics and subtopics underneath them. If you're on the fence or you're new to looking at CIMA, I highly recommend spending 10 or 15 minutes just reading through this, yes, line by line, and just not focusing on the test weightings, which are there, and that's helpful once you get into test prep, but just asking yourself as you go through every single line item, is this germane to my practice? Is this going to help me get where I want to go? Is this going to help me in my practice today? Is it going to help me help my clients better right now? And if you get through those 5 pages and not even half of it was on target, then unless somebody is telling you you have to get this certification, I don't think it's worth pursuing at this point. Not that it's not a great certification, it is. It just may not be right for you right now. And since you're going to spend probably at least 100 to 200 hours earning this certification, there's a great opportunity cost to consider, given everything else you've got going in your life and other opportunities to earn certifications that from a content standpoint may be more helpful or appropriate for you. So spend time on this document if you haven't already. That should really nail it down for you whether this content is a good match. Again, you can get this document from IWI's website. You can get it from our website, the Yale CIMA program public homepage, or you can just shoot me an email, jim.dobbs@yale.edu or jim@dobbseducation.com, either one, and I'll be happy to just send you a PDF of this document and the formula sheet. I'll send you that as well. Same thing, you can get that off of our website or IWI's. It's a 2-page document, as you can see here. And, if you're not mathematically inclined or dealing with these ratios on a regular basis, might be a little threatening, a little scary to you. The good news is it's only 2 pages. Another bit of good news, maybe even better, is this formula sheet is there for you present online when you're taking the exam. So you don't have to memorize these things. And they even tell you what the formula is. They don't just give you the formula for Sortino ratio. They tell you that that's what this formula represents. But you do need to know what they are, when to use them, how to use them, what the results mean. So that's kind of, again, more application and analysis based in terms of their testing. So they may give you a problem, a question, a fact pattern, and say you're doing active management. So let's say it's tactical asset allocation. So you can adjust allocations and managers, and you need to replace your Southeast Asia actively managed fund manager for whatever reason. They give you constraints, they give you goals and objectives, and then they give you 3 funds, for example, and then they give you a lot of data about the funds. And they say, which one's best? Okay, well, what you're going to do is you're going to use your knowledge to, first of all, pick out the right formula, the right metric to use to plug all that data in. If they're talking about active management on a consistent basis over time, not totally specific, but pretty sophisticated, pretty specific, then you're going to go for information ratio, because that's, out of all of these anyway, that's the best measurement to use. So that's the kind of way that you're going to use these formulas on your exam. Quick note, and then I'll move on. So the math in the CIMA curriculum and exam has gone down over time, just in the last 10 years, rather significantly, I would say. In the old days, it was easily half or more math on your exam. I would say 15 years ago, it's probably easily 50% more. Then they made a change about 6 or 7 years ago. It went down to 40%. Then they made a change about 4 years ago, and I would argue it's only down to about 25% now. So there's still a lot of math on it, or math-related questions, but it's just not as math-intensive as it used to be. So just a heads up, that may or may not be a good thing. If you're a math whiz, you may be like, darn, I would love to see more math. But a lot of people in our industry are not highly math. They're not just all that excited about math. Now, that being said, the last thing I'll mention is, if you're way below average in math, or you really don't like math, I doubt you're even on this call, because this is not the business for you probably. And CIMA would not probably be a good fit for you as well. Okay. Don't mean to scare you off. I just want to be very realistic about this whole thing. Real quickly here, although you'll get a copy of these slides and the video recording as well sometime next week, So you can spend a little more time, and IWI's even got a more advanced kind of version of this slide on their website, comparing CIMA to a bunch of other certifications. Now, I like this slide because it's got 4 of the bigger, better certifications, more rigorous, I should say, certifications. CIMA is investments only. Oh, there's a little bit of retirement, there's a little bit of tax, but they've really weeded most of that out over the years. It's predominantly an investment certification, just like CFA. But as I mentioned at the outset of this call or info session, CIMA doesn't go as far, it doesn't go as deep, it's not as quantitative, it clearly doesn't take as much time, 6 months versus 4 years. I'll talk about those in a minute. But look, if there's anybody out there that you really do want to be a securities analyst, you do really want to crunch the data, looking through financial statements on a daily or at least regular basis to decide, is this security good for our portfolio? Is it bad? Do we need to hold it? Do we need to sell it? Do we need to buy more of it? That kind of thing. Well, then leading towards the goal of being an institutional portfolio manager, then CIMA's fine, but CFA is where you need to be. You're going to need to either have a CFA charter or have those skills, in my opinion, to be successful in that business. But what we're talking about is something tangential. It's similar, but it's different. Client-facing, financial advisor, investment advisor. Those situations line up much better for CIMA, in my opinion. And because there's so much less content, it takes much less time. Now, don't let that fool you. CIMA is a very challenging exam. Pass rates over the last year or so for first-time candidates have been between 50 and 60%. Now, the Yale candidates versus the aggregate all others has been higher in pass rate every single year we've been around in existence, in other words. But still, our high would be like 70, 75% in any given quarter. So that means even at Yale, 1 in 4, 1 in 3, in a really bad quarter, 1 in 2 of even the Yale candidates are going to have to retest. So just because it's shorter doesn't mean it's easier. It's very challenging. There's just less to cover, if you will. Okay, CFP is financial planning. It's all things financial planning, very, very broad, takes much longer, about 1.5 years for most individuals. Our companion program, if you will, CPWA, Certified Private Wealth Advisor, that's financial planning for those who are working with high net worths. Most of us on that committee, I think maybe all but one, were CFP designees who created CPWA. And the idea was, well, if your practice evolves and now you're dealing with 5, 10, 20, 30, $50 million clients on a regular basis, CFP really wasn't targeted towards that part of a client base. So where do we go to get that information? So we created CPWA to fill in those holes, to take a deeper dive on the tax, the asset protection, the estate planning, the family dynamics and family transfer aspects that you're going to be dealing with your 10, 20, $30 million clients. And investments is just one piece, as you can see here, of the CPWA curriculum. And again, CIMA, just a deeper dive in investments. That's what it's all about. So hopefully you're here in the right place. Let me just do program goals and objectives, and then we'll stop for early questions. I think it's always important for you to know when you go to an education program, this is not for academic credit, mind you, but still an education program, and then into test prep, what that provider's trying to help you do. Now, we've got a lot of goals and objectives, but I want to give 3 of arguably the most important. One is to deliver comprehensive coverage of all of those topics. And on that 5-pager, if you count them up like I do every time they change it, it's over 500 items. And then when you add the sub items that aren't even on that sheet, it's easily over 1,000 for a 140 question exam. So we need to get you comprehensive coverage in some combination of the education course and test prep. In some cases, as you can imagine, we cover any of those items in both. But in some, it's just better or more appropriate to have them in either. But we need comprehensive coverage, but we need it to be really efficient. Otherwise, it'd take you years to get through 1,200 items, right? So there's a balancing act that we have to do, but we take that very seriously. That middle one is the one I get most excited about, because when I see you in person at a industry event or an IWI conference or a Yale event or whatever, we usually talk about your practice and whether this made a difference in your practice or not. So when you come back and say, absolutely, my technical skills went up, I could talk and dive into the analysis better. And I had a ton more confidence, both with my current clients and my prospects. So that one's the most exciting in my mind. And then last but not least, because I was in your chair once upon a time, as I think Kelly told you at the outset, since I hold this certification as well, I was sitting there too. And then as you get closer to your certification exam testing date, well, kind of all the nice altruistic stuff goes out the window, and it's just, okay, I'm 1 week out, I'm 2 weeks out, I'm 3 weeks out. I just need to pass this exam. So we're going to start out big on the educational side. We're going to do some work in areas that aren't heavily tested, but we think as a program faculty are very helpful in your practice. So it's going to be practical. And then as you move through the weeks, become months, we're going to drill down more and more into the exam. So at the end, you're getting exactly what you want and need, which is just try and help me pass this exam. So getting through that exam is very, very important. And as I mentioned, we've got a nice success record on the pass rates for Yale candidates. Okay, I'll let you stare at this while Kelly, please tell me if we have any early questions.
Not at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions in mind, please do feel free to submit them anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to stop anywhere along the way. Okay, so some nuts and bolts on the structure and details. As I think I mentioned, $59.95 is kind of the price point for this. That includes your CIMA candidacy fees. All that goes to IWI as your certifying body, of course. That includes one attempt at the certification exam. If you fail and need to take it again, it's, don't quote me on this because they change it. I've done this for so many years. This goes up and it goes down, but $225 is what they charge for members if you choose the membership option as you go into candidacy. And I think it's $325 per attempt after your first one. Now, most of our candidates, as I've mentioned, pass on the first attempt, but not everybody. So you need to know that there could be additional fees if you need to retest on the certification exam. That includes all your Yale material. That's the course, the online materials, the test prep, etc. You can get into this program at Yale anytime you want. So that was one of the things we wanted to create, an asynchronous program. We were already going to be the first online program for CIMA candidates when we started this started planning 8 years ago. But we wanted to be really flexible for you guys. So we know that your schedules are all over the place. I didn't want to have official start and stop dates. I wanted to let you come in when you knew you were ready to come in and you had the capacity to get started on a new curriculum. You do have 365 days of access. That's what your $59.95 buys you in terms of the Yale program. It really shouldn't take anybody 365 days to earn CIMA certification if you put in the time and follow our study guidance, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But if it does, you can buy an extra year of Yale access through us for $2,250 in the CIMA program. Now, that being said, even if you run out of time, let's just say great things happen and you take in a ton of new business right after you register for our program and you just try, but you can't get it done. And you're at 11 months and you're getting email reminders from us monthly. You're getting weekly reminders for your first 6 months in the Canvas program from me on a bunch of different things. And you get to the 11th month and you're like, oh, Kevin just sent me an email or Kelly just sent me an email. I've only got 1 month left. There's no way I'm going to finish. Well, just finish the course, which I'll talk about in a minute, and download all the test prep. In this program, Yale allows you to download, save, copy, print, any of this, as long as you just don't share it with anybody. So just study off your hard drive for the certification exam if you don't finish in time, if you don't get certified in time, and that'll save you a couple $1,000s for that second year of access if you run out of time in that first year. But again, 6 months is pretty normal once candidates get started, so really shouldn't be an issue for most of you. All right, I kind of talked about flexibility, the asynchronous format of this program, but I want to kind of hit a couple of high points here. We did want it to be to where, like, even though it's online, there are synchronous programs where, like, you show up on Tuesday nights or Thursday nights or every other Wednesday or whatever. Didn't want it to be that way. We actually beta tested that in the early days, but when we had live sessions, we might have 200 people. Now we've got like 600 or 700 people in the program at any time. But in the early days, we might only have 200, and like 10 people would show up to the live session and everybody else would just watch it on demand after. So we learned after about a year, don't really need to do that. Everything we do is on demand. Now, we may have some live sessions here or there, but those are going to be on demand and they won't be time sensitive. So we really wanted to create maximum flexibility for you. That being said, maximum flexibility in an online or distance program can be an issue for people who don't have motivation. They don't manage their time well. They get distracted. On and on those issues or reasons go. So we give you guardrails, we give you best practices, we give you study schedules, we give you all of that to help you plug in at your own speed. But you are going to study whenever and wherever you choose, because remember, again, you can download everything. So like even the 32 hours or so of lecture video, just like if you were at Yale in the classroom and we were teaching live, that's all recorded. Instead of doing it in the classroom, we as faculty just went down into the Yale studio and we just recorded down there. But you could download all of that as an MP4. You could convert it to an MP3 and listen, through your headset or whatever when you're working out. You just don't have to be at your computer to be studying. There's only one exception to that, and I'll get to it in a minute, where you will have to be at your computer and you will have to be online. And again, I'll tease you a little bit, and in a few slides we'll talk about that. So you're going to go at your own pace, really, really important. Having done a number of certifications, well beyond the 3 that Kelly mentioned, I just don't publicize those or use those. In fact, I've dropped some of those as well through the years. They're just not as credible or rigorous, if you will. But studying at your own pace is really important. I wanted to create a program at Yale to where if you want to go fast track and try to knock all this out in a month or 6 weeks, you can do it. In fact, I'll just throw this out for any of you who are super competitive. 14 days, that's the record. I'm not saying you should try that, but if you want to fast track and go for that, you can do that. So I also know that there are going to be some individuals who study a little slower or are newer to this business or have trouble with tests, always have learning challenges, learning disabilities, whatever. And so I want you to be able to move slowly, even though the average is 4 to 6 months once you get started. You've got a year. And even then, you just got to get through the education component and download all the test prep if you run out of time. And just as important as that, I didn't want to put you in cohorts to where all of you who are going to fast track are going to be stressing out the people who are going slow, right? For whatever reason, they want to go slower and you're just freaking them out. So we don't want to do that. And vice versa. We don't want all of us who would be going slower and more methodically to be really boring the people who wanted to fast track. So the point is, you move through in 2 weeks or a whole year, whatever works for you. It won't take long the way we've got this set up for you to, especially once you get into test prep, to figure out, hey, I'm going to try to fast track this, or no, I'm going to take 3 months. I'm going to take 2 months. I'm going to take, whatever time. All right. Speaking of time and expectations, I've already kind of dropped a couple of anchors for you, but let me go ahead and clean that up and be a little more detailed. 100 to 200 hours, I feel quite certain if you're going to do a population bell-shaped curve, that easily the majority of people fall in that 100 to 200 hours. Now, I get it. That's a fairly wide range, but I want the expectation to be realistic. And clearly, somebody who's knocking this out in 2, 4, 6 weeks is most likely spending less than 100 hours to get through the education component and get ready for the certification exam. But on the flip side of that, we do have candidates that report back to me, and in this program, Eric and I do most of the communication, and Kevin, with you guys along the way. But there are some every year that say, I'm pretty sure I spent 500 hours on this. Okay, well, again, somebody that hadn't been in the business very long. Maybe they've only got their Series 7 exam, Series 7, maybe 63 done, nothing else more complicated or sophisticated or challenging. Maybe they're a slow learner, learning disabilities that they know because they've had them since they were, children, that kind of thing. And so that happens. Now, again, that's kind of on the tail, but it does happen. Of course, it all depends on your experience, knowledge, especially on technical skills, study habits, test taking skills. All those things are going to play a role. And to be honest, I think if we are just candid, none of us, until you go through the whole process, you're not going to know where you fall in that 100 to 200 hours, or if you're on either side of it. You just won't know until you get through it. That being said, one last thought on this, and then we'll move on, is that 5-page topics list I sent you or showed you. If you go through that, and not just asking how applicable it is, you might also ask yourself, how knowledgeable am I already in a lot of these areas? If you get through it and you're like, I'm pretty sure 70 or 80%, I've got a decent handle on. Okay, well, then you're not going to be a 500-hour person probably. So I think just doing a little self-analysis and going through the topic list can help you not really specifically narrow it down, but at least get you in the ballpark on how long this is probably going to take you to get through. All right, let's do 2 slides and then we'll stop for questions. Let's talk about the education course within this program. Again, remember, 2 parts in our program: the required education course. Every CIMA candidate, well, unless you're a CFA already, every CIMA candidate has to go through a registered education course that's been approved by IWI. And then you've got to pass your certification exam. Those are 2 of the 4 E's, as IWI likes to call them: education over here, and then exam. So we're going to put those 2 together, but we are going to separate those. And we're not going to show you the test prep until you pass the course. The course is made up of those video lessons, 30-something hours that I mentioned. This is really meant not to cover all the 500 to 1,000 topics on that list. It's not meant to narrow down what we think you're going to see on the test, the exam, the certification exam itself. Just meant to really make sure you have a strong foundation in what we think are either core or more challenging areas of this curriculum. So you're going to go through those videos, and then 11 times you're going to stop and take a test. And that test could be anywhere from about a dozen questions to 30 questions. You can take that test, that section test we call it, as many times as you need to. It's open book, but we give you a couple of ideas on how to work through it to optimize your learning pattern, if you will. And they're not proctored, they're just in the platform. So you just take them as many times as you need to pass and move on to the next section. But that's what you're going to do to get through the course. There is a very comprehensive readings library, over 2,000 pages, including my old book from, I don't think anybody's done in fact, I'm pretty sure nobody has done another CIMA textbook like the one you see there on your screen. In fact, you can see how old it is. It even says IMCA instead of IWI. So that's one of about 4 texts we use, and you'll have access to those through PDF versions. Again, you can print them, save them, do whatever you want with them. Now, that being said, unlike when I was 20 years old, well, you're not 20, but when I was in my 20s in college, you just went through the textbooks, showed up at class, took a quiz, repeat until you get to a midterm or a final exam. It's not the way this works. Most of us learn better by audio and visual and by application. So those video lessons and those corresponding tests, that's going to be your primary learning at the course level. The readings library is a library. You just go to it when something doesn't make sense in one of the tests, or better yet, in one of the lectures, and you're like, wow, that's interesting, but clearly I fully don't get that. I'm going to go into the readings library. There may be 7 pages on it. There may be 27 pages on it, but that's just for the deeper dive instead of Googling or using AI or whatever, as an online resource. That'll get you right where you need to go in most of those cases. So that's the course. Once you pass those 11 tests, we send your name to IWI, and we say, hey, look, Jim has completed the Yale course. He's eligible to schedule his certification exam now. and then they send you an email that says, hey, congratulations, Jim. Yale said you passed the course. Here are your instructions for scheduling your exam. Now, you're not going to want to take your exam yet because you've got all the test prep we're about to talk about to go through. You might schedule it a date out in the future because they make it really easy and no cost. If you give them a day or two to change your date, you may want to go ahead and schedule it. That being said, as you'll see in our program, one of the best practices we tell you is don't even click on anything in that congratulations email from IWI, because when you do, they're going to start a 90-day testing window for you. And if you don't test in the 90 days, they're going to charge you $225 to retake the exam, which you never took. So there are some things in there that you want to have a heads up on, and we have in our program. Say, if you're pretty sure on when you want to test now, go ahead. But if not, just don't even click on that yet. Get into the test prep, go through the intro to test prep, even get into a few of the 23 sections, and then figure out when you want to click on that link in their email, which starts your 90-day clock. But again, I'm kind of in the weeds there, but those are the kind of things that we want to give you a heads up for in the program so that you can manage this the best way for you to have a best shot at passing this exam. So then your test prep opens for you. Yale sends you the certificate of completion of the course that you just passed. Let's talk about the test prep for a little bit, and then we'll stop. And so we give you kind of like the best practices and guardrails I told you about earlier. We give you a 30, 60, and 90-day test prep schedule. You don't have to use it, but I know that some of you want a lot of direction. Some of you don't want hardly any direction. But for those of you who need some more guidance, I wanted to put together just a schedule to where you could get through the whole 5-page topic list by topic, even down to the hours that I think you ought to spend, probably based on how much it's tested and based on difficulty in each of those sections. So use those, don't use those, it's whatever. And if you ask us, which we encourage you to do along the way, well, what do you think I ought to do? If you don't know, just shoot for 2 months and then speed up or slow down after you get a few sections in. That seems to work for most people. So there are 23 sections. If you look at that 5-page color-coded PDF we briefly went through earlier, and we've got test prep videos by me in all of those. And now it's not a situation where I'm just trying to re-explain everything again. You did that at the course level on what we thought was, again, remember, really important or really complicated. Now it's just going through that 5-page list and those 500 plus items and saying, over the last year, guys, this has been heavily tested. You need to know these next 3 slides, the idea, the concept, the application, the calculation, whatever. You need to know this because it's probably going to be on your exam based on all the prior candidates that have talked to us about it in the last year. See these next 2 slides? It's right here on their list. You know, it's line 3E1-A or whatever. It's almost never tested. I can't even remember the last time anybody told me that was on the test. So skim these next 2 slides. Don't worry about them. They're probably not going to show up, and let's just move on. And then the last category or last bucket, if you will, would be, okay, so now see these next 4 slides? These are the in-between. This is in the in-between area. It's definitely tested regularly, but it's definitely not all the time. It's definitely not next to never either. Pardon the double negative. So these 4 slides, yes, you don't have to spend as much time as you did the high priority slides, but these you still need to know because I think there's a 50-50, 60-40 chance, give or take, that you're going to see it. So that's just a way to kind of cull it down, right? I mean, with 1,000 plus subtopics, you need a way to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. What is reasonable amount of time? As we talked about, 100 to 200 hours, but from a more practical level, if you will, 10 hours a week, that's fine. 5 hours a week is probably not enough to do significant damage and get this knocked out. But 20 hours a week is probably overkill for most of you because you're working 40 to 60-hour weeks already, and you've got a family and you've got other personal responsibilities as well. So 10 to 12 hours, I'd say 8 at the least on a pretty regular weekly basis. That's your goal. Over 1,000 test prep slides, because again, we want to cover really all of those topics and subtopics. And that's what I go over in those test prep videos with you. So you're writing on those as you go through. Hopefully, this is highly tested. This is not. I feel great about this from the coursework already. Oh, I don't know anything about this. So that's how you're working through to start each of those sections. And then you've got over 1,000 practice questions between the practice sets. For each of the 23 sections, you'll have practice sets and then a full-length mock exam. Now, that being said, as you can see in my footnote here, you're going to have over 7 mock exams worth of practice questions once you go through this whole thing. In the old days, we even had multiple mock exams, but what we found when we tracked, the progress and the data online, most people weren't doing anything more than the full-length mock exam, the first one. So I thought that's no good. If I've got a practice question in this curriculum, I want you to look at it. It's important. It's not a layup. It's not a cheapie. It's in there for a reason. So that's why we broke them up, and we've only got one, kind of formal mock exam based on the same timing of the exam you'll take, the actual certification exam, based on the topics weightings, all of that stuff. It's just one last exercise before you go sit for the exam. But the real assessment, if you will, won't be at the full-length mock exam level. It'll be in all those mini practice sets that you have into the 23 content sections. And then again, the mock exam should just be enough to, you get a 78 or an 86 or whatever. And as you'll see, our mock exam, as our practice questions, are very difficult. Most of them, most would argue, are at least a little harder than the certification exam. We did that on purpose for obvious reasons, I think. And then again, full mock exam just lets you know, okay, yeah, I'm done. I'm ready. I'm ready to go test. All right, I'll just stop right there as you stare at some details about the certification exam, and let's see if we've got any questions.
Okay, we do have one. We currently have an advisor running individual stock models in-house for our RIA. That advisor is retiring, and we are trying to figure out if our 2 CFPs can take the CIMA and step in the shoes of the retiring advisor to run the models, or if we should hire a CFA. Do you think the CIMA would be sufficient?
Ooh, really good question. That's a very exciting question. I'll give you my quick off the top of my head. If you want to call me or email me, have a short discussion, I'd be happy to do that with you as well. I think it depends on the portfolios and it depends on the people. So if your portfolios are highly complex, they're literally individual securities, individual stocks, bonds, assets, etc. It's going to need to be, in my opinion, it's probably going to need to be somebody with CFA or CFA level skills. It doesn't mean they have to go get CFA, but they need to have those skills. And if they don't already, CFA would be a great way to work towards those skills. If it's like most RIAs do, there's an asset allocation, dynamic, tactical, strategic, and funds, ETFs, private money managers, separate accounts, whatever, that is going to fill out some kind of allocation methodology you're using, then I don't think CFA level skills are necessary. I think CIMA was built for that. So yeah, if they have discretion and they are making the decisions, but they're making decisions on asset classes, active managers, passive indexing, which is much more complicated than it was 25 years ago, 30 years ago when I started, then CIMA should work just fine. But if it's bottoms up and they're picking stocks, then yeah, CIMA is not going to be enough for them to become outstanding in that particular way. But great question.
Okay, I think we can move on.
Okay, the exam. So you stared at this long enough, and I don't know why that lady's smiling. I guess she just got her score report and she passed. But it's 140 questions, as I mentioned. 125 are scored. So 5 to 15 beta non-scored items. All the exams do that, CFP, CFA, etc. You will not know which ones the beta unscored items are, of course. And we give you some guidance for how to identify those and how to strategically maneuver those, if you will, in our program. You've got 5 hours to complete it. Your experience in our test prep is probably going to give you a decent idea on how much of that 5 hours you're going to need. If you're acing, not everything, hardly anybody aces everything. It's a broad enough curriculum and deep enough as well. But if you're doing really, really well on 3/4 of our material right out of the gate, then you're probably not going to take 5 hours. But, we'll give you some ideas on how to start practice timing yourself, including our mock exam, and hopefully having 20 to 30 minutes to go back and review all of the questions you pressed, answer, but review. There is that option no matter how you test. Speaking of how you test, you can go down to a Pearson VUE Testing Center, which we recommend. You don't have to, but they're all over. And now that we're out of COVID, knock on wood somewhere, you can usually get a seat on the day and time that you want. That being said, you can test at home. They have Proctor U now is contracted through IWI, and so you can test at home. We don't usually recommend that. I mean, it's okay, but there are some negatives to that, and we explain that in our what to do when you think you're ready to test or schedule your test, part of our program. Calculator policy, you should read the full thing, which is on the next page. That being said, before I get to the next page, if you don't have a financial calculator or you're not really good at using your financial calculator, just go to this website, tvmcalcs.com. It's free. It's a really, really good, I don't know how I stumbled onto it years ago, but it's a great website. And then pick out your calculator and then go through the 15 or so examples he gives you. And it's step by step. I mean, like which keystroke to press, and what order, all of that good stuff. You spend an hour or two on that, you'll definitely know your calculator well enough to be successful in this program. I guess I took it out. That being said, on the candidate handbook, and I'll send you that by email if you want it, or again, you can get it off of our website or IWI's website. They actually list the calculators that are allowed. The first TI and the first Hewlett Packard financial calculators on this TVM Calcs website. He gives you a list of calculators. The first one of each of those companies, those are the most popular candidate financial calculators in our program. So I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those first choices. Okay, let's talk about where's my help. It's very important. This is meant to be an autonomous self-study distance program. So most of it's going to be on you, but you're going to have some help. I've already talked about a lot of the different help that we give you along the way, including orientation videos, both at the education course level and test prep, separate videos, because obviously you're working with different kinds of tools and resources in each of those areas of the program. Best practices, tips, videos. I think I mentioned I'm sending you in your Canvas platform based on the month that you came into the program, sending you weekly reminders and best tips and practices, notes, that kind of thing for about 5 months, your first 5 months as well. I mean, we don't want to overdo it, but I want you to be engaged. I want you to be thinking about this on a regular basis so you can get started well and pick up momentum along the way. Discussion board and study groups, I think, are very, very important, especially discussion board. This one's a really big one in this program, 23 sections, plus half a dozen other kind of almost random topics that y'all seem to talk about or ask about over the not only 7 or 8 years I've been doing this at Yale, but the 15 years I've been doing this, when you count the other programs before I moved to Yale. So got a pretty good idea on what's going to trip you up and what's going to be more complex and challenging. And so we leave those up if we think it's going to be asked again with either the student or the candidate who talked with the other candidate to get them through the challenge, or their question, or myself or Eric, or probably the two instructors that are going to be in there working with you guys on those. We leave those up so it acts as an FAQ. So if you're in the whatever section it is, maybe it's section 12, and you're like, Cap M, I've never seen this before. I know many of you have, but maybe some of you haven't. You're like, the SML just is confusing me. Okay, well, go into that section's discussion board, do a Control F search for SML, security market line, and chances are some or several people have asked about that. So that's a good way to get your questions answered. If you ever have any administrative questions, Yale and Dobbs staffs are available 8 to 5 Eastern, Monday through Friday. Canvas that's the platform. the technology platform, they've got technology help 24/7. So if you're like, I was on the computer yesterday, no problem. I'm on a different computer today. This looks wacky. We'll just reach out through Canvas and get them to help you there. And then ask the expert is the last thing I want to mention, but it's very important. We are not for academic credit, and we're not priced that way either. This is an executive education level program. So there is a 12 content question limit. We just call those your lifelines. We ran a rough estimate analysis a few months ago, and only about 2% of CIMA candidates that we've had asked their 12 questions. So it's good. We've got it where it needs to be. You shouldn't need to ask more than your 12 questions. So they're very important. You want to keep them in your back pocket and pull them out definitely when needed. Like the video didn't make sense on that. My practice question, I'm really confused about this. I didn't see any discussion on the discussion board. Help. We'll use one of your lifelines, and we'll be happy to help you with that. That being said, if you're an individual for whatever reason, and you're like, yeah, but that makes me feel funny. I think I really need a lot of interaction, or at least significant interaction with my program faculty, then this won't be the program for you. CIMA won't be an option for you, a good option, because there's no program that offers that. From what we understand, this is the most interaction you'll get on a one-on-one basis in terms of your choices out there. But it's just important that you know the 12 content question limit. There's no limit on administrative questions. I forgot my password or the URL, or how much time do I have left, or hey, Jim or Eric, here's my study plan and I want to test in 3 months. Is this a good study plan? That's unlimited. You don't have any limits on those. All right, couple last things here. Program faculty, you can read more about the in-depth faculty and instructor bios on our website. A whole lot more information there. Toby's outstanding. I've been working with him for over 15 years, not just at Yale and other programs that we work together. He's fabulous. Roger Ibbetson's a legend. So it's really great, some of the faculty we have in this program. Feedback's very important to us, qualitative and quantitative. We are not perfect, but we're trying. We're trying every single week of the year to make sure that we have a good feel of what's on the exam and what you need to study to pass within the limits IWI gives us. And this whole time, we've just been trying to help you figure out, is CIMA certification right for you? And is the Yale process and program right for you? It's all about flexibility on our end, about flexibility, giving you several different ways to learn videos, whether you do audio or video. The readings library, all kinds of practice questions and study aids, those kinds of things. Definitely, I think we have the most comprehensive coverage. Some might argue we have too much coverage, but I'll take that. But you've got to have the motivation and self-discipline to make this happen. All those tools we're going to give you and help, that's all we can do. Can't reach through the camera and make you do it. You've got to be able to do it. So if you're ready for a challenge, this will be challenging, and you want to join us at Yale and it's right for both of us, then we definitely want you to come join the Yale family. As I mentioned at the beginning, to start, you would just apply for candidacy through the IWI website, and this whole process will take up to about 2 weeks to get you approved and get you up and running in the Yale platform. And there's our contact information. Let's just stare at that and we'll see if we have, hopefully we have some final questions, because I think we've got a couple more minutes.
Yep. So we have a couple questions about the mock exam. So for the mock exam or any of the sort of practice sets, if you get a question wrong, does it give you the correct answer and an explanation on why it is,
Yeah, great question.
why it's incorrect? And also just added to that, can you take the mock exam multiple times?
Yes, work backwards. So yes, you can take it as many times as you need to, but in any of these programs and on a lot of certifications, there's a challenge called the memory trap. Anytime any of us have seen a question 2, 3, 4, 7 times, we just know what the answer is. Our short-term memory is good enough to pick that up. So you definitely want to be careful of that. We give you all kinds of warnings and what to do and what not to do to avoid that. So on the practice sets, including the mock exam, yeah, everything has a correct answer, whether you get it right or wrong, and you'll be able to see that. Every one of your attempts at every practice set and the mock exam is recorded, so you can go back and look and see how you did in any one of those if you wanted to. that can be helpful in terms of nailing down. Can't remember if I got that right the last time or not. Well, just go look at the history and it'll pull up for you. And then explanations, not just the correct answer. You need an explanation on why that is. Now, sometimes it's simple, like, well, according to the whatever theory, it's just stated, it's a defined term, so it is what it is. But sometimes the explanation's a whole page long, so you need those as well. Now, that being said, you don't have any of that at the course level. Those required tests, those short ones after the videos, that's required for you to pass this course and earn your certificate. So we don't give you that help. You need to go back in and pass it without the aid. But once you get to test prep, all of that, yeah, there's aid on every single one of those questions, because you need that as you prepare for the certification exam. Great question.
Okay, we are at time, so but we did just have a question come in, so we're gonna go ahead and answer this. Is there a particular calculator you recommend, and is one more popular than the others?
Yeah, again, just go to you can even do this while I'm talking, tvmcalcs.com. And the first TI, Texas Instruments, and the first HP, Hewlett Packard calculator, those are the most two common. Either one of those is fine. I really don't think there's much of a difference between the two in terms of like efficiency. I use the HP 12C, and they have a more modern platinum version of that. That's one of the more sophisticated ones. I wouldn't choose this unless you really just want to go all in and spend 3 or 4 hours learning how to use, I mean, not like in one sitting, but it's just more complicated. They use something called reverse Polish notation, which, it's kind of hard until you get used to it. And so I wouldn't recommend that probably. Just either one of those first HP or TIs, you'll be fine.
Okay, that looks like it for questions. So let's go ahead and get this wrapped up. So thanks, Jim, for all your great information today. And thanks for the questions that everyone submitted. We really appreciate you joining us. And for more information, you can visit our website or reach out to us directly with any additional questions. We will be sharing the video and the slides with you in the coming days. And thanks again. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.